Okay, I thank you so much, Paul, for ending, being the beginning of the ending of the keynote. So big responsibility, and I want to just pause for a moment and say that a summit like this is not like every conference. Really, we take a moment out of our day, out of our life, and we come here, we share what we've learned, we learn from each other. So I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who's making this possible. So we have Bill and the organizers, all the attendees, all the speakers who put in the hard work to bring their talks here, and just the hotel. It's been a great experience. I was here last year, and I just want to thank you back. Thank you for inviting me back, and it's an honor to do the last talk. So a little bit more about me. I'm Kristen, and I'm a product manager. I work on the Azure developer tools at Microsoft. On our team, we think about the end-to-end experience for developers, and we try to make it as straightforward as possible for building, working with any programming language, building for any platform, and deploying to Azure. So in my role, I spend quite a bit of time thinking about the developer lifecycle, the developer process, the workflow, how developers spend their time. And you probably have seen this before. This is a familiar DevOps cycle of how we release code and how we monitor and observe and then bring those changes back into our product and our code and our business. And so in my role, I try to keep developers in their workflow, but be able to deploy to Azure. And over the last, just continuously, we're getting more interest in AI. So we work with partners like Pinecone and Llama Index, and just going more and more into AI. So I am going to talk about AI. I know Paul mentioned some people said that they're going to talk about AI a little bit, or it was a badge of honor to say, I'm not going to talk about AI. We're going all in. We're talking about AI. So the tool I specifically think about and that I'm a product manager for is called AZD. It's a command line tool for developers, and it packages up more atomic operations to the cloud service provider, the host, and it has things that feel familiar to developers. So AZD init, AZD up, AZD pipeline config. We try to stay in the developer workflow. With this tool, we also have applications, and they live within this gallery. This is a community gallery. It's open source. Our tool is open source. And we have about 130 templates and growing, but you can see I've filtered it just to the AI applications, and so there's 49 and counting, and these are our most popular templates. And it's growing really rapidly. So I'm going to give you just a quick primer on how this works. A developer selects a template, and basically you do AZD init and pass the argument for the template with the template name from the repo. So a developer will just run AZD init, and then you have a fully working application, and you have your Azure YAML that will count to define the services, and then basically with the infrastructure as code and all of the source code and everything that you need packaged into this one application, it gives you hello world, it gives you the opportunity to provision all of your services, and then it helps you to stay in an iterative practice by getting you set up with a CI/CD pipeline so that you can keep responding to the business needs in that developer workflow that I just showed you earlier. Once you have this running, you can swap out your code and make it your own, or if anybody remembers our first computers back in the 90s, like home computers, and you take it apart to figure out how it works, or you take something apart, a clock, anything, just to figure out how it works, this is the cheapest way to take something apart and figure out how it works. So we have seen a really lot of popularity and an increase in the AI features that people want to build into their software applications. So earlier this year, we added a new endpoint for AI, and so this is a way to work with Azure AI. And it gives you this way that you can define services. So here, a chat service is defined working with an AI endpoint. And this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about and that we're going to talk about today. So I think we all remember November 2022, ChatGPT was announced, and it really felt like a 0 to 1 moment. It was like, AI is here, this is the moment. But it started showing up in all these talks, so CEOs in their quarterly calls started mentioning AI a lot, and you can see this sharp upward measurement of that number. So it really feels like, oh yeah, this is happening. AI is like here. It wasn't here yesterday. Now it's here. And when you look at search terms over time, this goes between 2004 to today, and it feels like 0 to AI, 0 to 1, just takes a sharp upward directional movement in the graph. So why this moment? You know, I know ChatGPT went from 0 to 1 million users in 5 days, and that's a big record. But is that still 0 to 1? Is that 0 to AI is what we're here to talk about today? Because it really took decades to get there, if we think about it. So the first chatbot was called Eliza. Has anyone seen Eliza? Okay, very cool. So it used pattern matching, and it used substitutional methodology to be able to have this conversation. It didn't live long, but it is noted as the first chatbot. And then in the 90s, we had another one called Dr. Sabatio. Has anyone heard of this one? Okay, so you can see it's called Sound Blaster Acting Intelligence Text-to-Speech Operator, not like it's a mouthful or anything. But we've been working on chatbots for a while, so we have a whole list of them. These were all the chatbots that I was able to find over the last 7 decades. That's a long time. And then, do you remember our friend Clippy? Okay, so Clippy existed from 1997 to 2003, and Clippy was not an AI tool. So no AI involved, just an assistant that was in the program. But Clippy did tell us a lot about the limitations of AI. So it really felt intrusive, I think, is kind of the brand it walked away with, and its limitations really led to being pulled from the Microsoft products. But this demonstrated a really important point. It demonstrated that even though we had some of the technology for the AI bots, the cultural shift hadn't happened. We weren't ready for anything that intrusive in our life. That was not going to happen. So decades of chatbot inventions. We have Clippy. Like, what really made it so successful? There's this famous quote that says that it takes 20 years for an overnight success, and I added or more because we're talking about 7 or 8 decades. And I've been thinking about this a lot and wondering, like, what made this moment different? And we could say that there were extra tools for developers. It's where AI and ML engineers come together with software engineers, that the ability for us to be able to work closer with it was the moment. But really, I think it was more of, it's talked about as a watershed moment. So I started looking into what is a watershed. And a watershed is this basin of water that basically changes the flow after all the water is coming down from the precipitation, from the rivers, and it creates it determines the next direction of flow, or like where you can pull it into the basin. So a watershed moment in something like this, in AI, basically serves to help signify a pivotal point and a turning point in directionality of where AI is going. So that's why we're probably all seeing AI in our personal lives and in our professional lives, and the demand is really significant. So let's go back in time and think about how we used to search for things. We used to go to the library. How many people have actually used a card catalog or seen one? Okay, so we used to have these card catalogs where you can see in the picture on the right where these are where they're produced. So people would type up the card catalogs, put them into the cards, organize them, and then the person here on the left is looking up a book. Then they have to take the card, walk to the shelf, find the book, go into the book, find the information they're looking for in the book. And so this is just the original search engine before we had computers. Then came the 90s and our personal computers, and we started using browsers and search engines, and this feels like a 0 to AI moment, or 0 to 1 moment, where it's like, this is the moment. We have arrived, but we didn't even know ourselves in 2022 when we would learn about ChatGPT. So this became really, really popular, but still, even this isn't a 0 to 1, because we had to have the actual browser to have search engines to be able to search for things and change our life in a pretty profound way. And so Tim Berners-Lee talked about how actually he wouldn't have been able to build the first browser if he didn't have the Next platform, because the Next platform accelerated his rate of being able to develop the browser, and he estimates by more than a year. So when we think about 0 to 1, I've been reflecting a lot on there really isn't a 0 to 1. There really isn't a time that I can think of that we have a business or a moment that really changes everything because it's brand new. Something always is coming before that. So it's like peeling an onion back. And that brings us to what we have today, which is this is how we might search for something. What is a watershed moment? And then Copilot comes back and gives me not just some information, but it's a conversation, and every subsequent question I ask stays in the context of the first question. And it also gives me questions that I could ask if I can't think of what my next questions are, so it kind of prompts me. So this is completely different. So what really is happening with ChatGPT announcements and this big shift we're feeling is that we're starting to digest and understand and really notice that we are in a massive turning point in how we work, how we operate. We went through this with the steam engine. We went through this with electricity, computing, now it's intelligence. But really, when I was reading about the steam engine industrial revolution, there were many steam engines. I did not know that. Many, many steam engines. Some of them failed, some of them helped to progress to the next, but we don't think about it like that. We think about it as this one moment. And so this is a great time for us at this summit to have a more expansive view and think about what does this really mean when we're talking about AI, and how will that shape what we do in terms of our business and our work. And so for every big invention, there's always something that came before it, a long line of innovators, creators, and customers. So when we think about this summit, it's not just about who's on stage speaking or what's happening. It's about the audience coming and the audience having questions or having conversations in that movement. And it's the same thing for big technology launches. Customers have to show up, purchase things, use things, interact. So it is a conversation between inventors and consumers and customers. So when we think about this big boom we're in, we should think about it as a big shift that is definitely not going away. So what does that mean for APIs and API providers? I think this is one of the biggest 3 points that I've been thinking about. So APIs are more discoverable. I was here last year when Z said that we've all been upgraded, and now APIs are discoverable not just with their open API specs, but really the machine to machine is sort of shifting and being able to see things in different ways than just using a spec. And then APIs are the connectivity. So all the APIs that are AI APIs that we're integrating into our products, they are the, as we've talked about, the glue between them. But are they the data source? So we've talked about this a little bit, especially in Z's presentation this year, and thinking about how we take information and data from PowerPoints and Word documents in the browser. So on one side, on APIs, we say documentation is the most important thing. You don't want your docs in a PDF like it's 2004. You want to be having it machine readable, but now we have AI agents that are not reading some of the data APIs. So when cloud arrived, some people were resistant and some people moved forward with the cloud, but now we know the cloud is definitely here to stay. Cloud computing, edge computing, the way we think about it, we don't just have one data center, one server. Mobile is here. Mobile is not going anywhere. And I think that we are starting to recognize that agents are here and agents aren't going anywhere. So this is another evolution in changing and shifting how we work. So when you're thinking about adding AI to your application, I want you to think about it in two ways. One, as a software developer or software development team or a business owner, whatever your role is, and bringing AI into your application as you are building it and putting that forth. And then also the opposite way. You are an API producer. How are people experiencing building with your API given the landscape shift, given that we have these agents? And so you might look at things like taking a spike or a prototype, testing it, making it real. But the first thing you need to do is make sure you understand your use case. You do not want to just peanut butter and AI all the things and have it generate text here and there. There are a lot of brand reasons to have AI in your application or in your customer's experience, and there's a lot of reasons to not have AI. So for example, one of the best examples that I came across was in a brand that sells shampoo and conditioner and hair products. You probably don't want AI-generated models and hair. You want real hair. That would be against your value promise to be that, present an AI-generated image. Whereas one of my favorite AI features is in O'Reilly's online reading. So when you're reading a book, you actually can chat with the book and ask questions about different things and do your own research in context of that book, making it a lot easier than flipping through the digital pages, because a digital book is much different than working with a physical book. So it adds a layer to be able to explore and understand the context. So when you're thinking about your use case, really prioritize why first. So as I said, you want to know how to extend AI, whether it will extend your brand promise or if it will harm your brand promise. And then think about how. And the reason I put how instead of what is because the way that you choose to implement it, you need to find a way to be scrappy and iterative. Don't really polish it and build it, because I think we're very early in this journey, given how many steam engines there were. I have some more charts to share with you about why I think we have a long road to go. So the easier that you can build quickly, and that might change exactly what it is that you deliver, and then you can test more quickly and start from the number one. Then you want to start selecting the right APIs. And there are literally hundreds of AI APIs, like hundreds. And when you start to go through them, you start to realize we're using a lot more AI already, not just since 2022, but a lot of different things. So I'm going to share these slides, so you'll have access to all of these, but these are some examples that might get you a little deeper into the process of thinking about how you might select different ways to use AI, and some of these might be used in combination together. So you might have a chat service, but you might be using a vision AI API to be able to read the text in something that is an unstructured image of text as opposed to structured data, as one example. But there are hundreds. So what you really want to do is think about model as a service and model stores. How many people are working with model stores or models as a service, or is this a new concept? Okay, so model as a service is basically being able to go to, I'll show you a couple of different ones, but this is the Azure AI Studio. And you can see here, I think, Paul, you said there's a clicker? 1,791 models, and this is growing constantly. So in July, I did a talk, and I think there were 1,200 models, so rapidly adding models. You can also see that I am not signed in. So you can go to the Azure AI Studio Marketplace. You can look at all these different models. You can explore by all these categories, so you can start to kind of get an idea of like what you might do in terms of using a model store. And one of the biggest reasons for using a model store is when we get later into the process, you'll see that when you're doing observability and you're doing evals and you're thinking about your model, you might need to swap it out, or you might need to use combinations of models. This also gives you a pay-as-you-can-go option. So there's all these benefits as opposed to going to integrate with just one model and calling it good. So GitHub also has a new model marketplace. And you can see there are a number of different models here. One of the really cool things about going this route is then you get a exploration, like a playground. A playground allows you to select a model, start to use it as if you were using AI in just your Copilot or your chat session. You can see that I just asked a question about some popular tourist attractions in Stockholm, and I can put a system prompt over into the parameters. I can also start tweaking it and add different ways to figure out how the LLM will respond. I can go through many different models and test them before I select one. So it really will help you to accelerate how you think about selecting these models, using the models, and then testing them, like I said, as an API producer, and how that works, how that model works with your API. Okay, we'll go with this. So when you're creating new value from existing value, you don't want to think about, back when I said don't AI, peanut butter, all the things, think about what your real business context are, and these are 3 examples. So let's say you want to make it easier for developers to understand your documentation and build with your API. You could build a RAG chat where basically they're looking at your data, your docs as the data input, and then using an LLM to be able to have that conversation. Because remember, it's all about the context. So asking a question, but then when you ask the next question, it's not like you're starting over as when you're in a search engine or you're in docs, like a doc site where you have to keep asking questions, but the context is lost. The context is still just in your head and not in the session. So another thing you might think about is call patterns and finding out how people are using your API, but also that might give you more insights into your business model and some of the ways that you might iterate there or work with your business to understand what people find most valuable about the API, and of course fraud and all kinds of other things. And then really figuring out how your API is selected by AI cannot be more important, because if you go back to Z's talk last year, APIs will be selected by AI agents, and the more you are not selected, the more you probably will be selected out, and that can happen pretty quickly. So when you're building this, remember I talked about the template applications. When you select one of those templates, what you get is an architecture, and then you also get out-of-the-box application. So you can look at the template, you can see what you're going to get. So you can see this is a chat application. It is one of our most popular ones, which is why I brought it here to share with you. And then it gives you the architecture of how it works. So now let's imagine that we want to apply this for the documentation example. So RAG is very popular right now, the retrieval augmented generation. So when you retrieve the document or retrieve the data, it can be from any data source. It can be from an API, it can be from a PDF document, it can be from a web page, it can be from the internet. But you can direct the data if you wanted to chat with the internet, if you wanted to chat specifically with your own data. And this is an example where somebody is asking a user question about the benefits. So, you know, what are the company perks that cover underwater activities? So I live in the United States. In the United States, our health is augmented a lot by different benefits from employers. And so one of them is spending money on wellness and then getting reimbursed for it. So you can see here, let's see if the pointer will work again. It's coming from this PDF on page 2, and then it's giving more natural language to the answer here. And that's a lot faster and a lot easier than reading through all of the PDF. So let's say that you've deployed this application, you're working with this application, then you want to monitor and make sure that all of these models are performing the way that you want to. A lot of people use the word hallucination. I don't really think that that's the right word, because that's giving the agents too much humanistic qualities, or it's just not quite the right one. It's just incorrect information. So we can just say, like, this LLM is incorrect, and we need to fix it and repair it. And once you start monitoring your application, you learn a lot more about how people are using this, and you can really make sure that you aren't having data drift and your bot is sort of running away without you. So we also, I mentioned we work with a lot of AI partners. So I recently worked with Arise, and they have this really great template. I can deploy this in 1 minute and 32 seconds, and then all I have to do is configure my app, and it will give me out-of-the-box dashboards. And this will be a great way for you to even take a template that I mentioned, like an application, so like the previous application, then add the monitoring, start to use it, and it's a great way to even learn how this might work in your real-world scenario, but at a easier on-ramp and easier kind of learning method. So don't be afraid to get hacky and take things apart to see how they work. Because now the agents are here, we have a more complicated DevOps flow. So we have all these new things. We are, selecting a model. We are thinking about security. We are doing embeddings, grounding data. Then we have these orchestrators that are also working with the LLMs. We have fine-tuning. We have to think about responsible AI. We have evals. And then it's just about responding to business. So it's more information. How do we respond to what people need, and being iterative? And the businesses that are most adapted to change are the ones that succeed. And so we have to really think about how this shift in work changes what we do every day and how we are able to continue building what we're building, our products and services. So as I mentioned, we don't know which steam engine that we're on. This is 8 decades. And this is showing a pretty technical diagram around flops, which is the measurement used to quantify the computing power. And it's getting shorter and shorter. And people use this a lot, like this diagram, to show how much faster we're going, because you can see the clusters here and the time. And it's moving so much faster. So we've hit that watershed moment, and now it is accelerating. So if you look here, we still have a really long, undefined amount of time, and that's where we all come in. So we need to take away from the summit some of the things we heard about how agents are working to interact with our data, how we want APIs to show up in the story. Like, in 10 years, what do we want to say about how APIs play a role in AI? Because I've heard lots of different things about they won't exist, they will exist. So that's up to us. The 3 most valuable companies on the S&P 500 are Apple, Microsoft, and NVIDIA. And Apple and Microsoft just keep going back and forth. They are both have been around for 50 years. So Microsoft just entered its 50th fiscal year, and next year will celebrate its 50th year. And Apple will be 50 in 2 years. And these companies keep reinventing themselves, and that's what we need to do when we respond to these changes. When the cloud came, we had to reinvent ourselves. When mobile came, we had to reinvent ourselves. And now we have agents in AI. So at Microsoft, I had the privilege of being able to see the first preview of Copilot come out. And then if you think from 2022 to 2023 as year 1, and 2023 to 2024, going from the fall to, or going from November to November and November to November, this is 30 products that a huge, massive company was able to transform. And so clearly, these companies, we can take inspiration from and how that we transform that. And as I mentioned, it's never about the technology alone. It's about the people in the process. So this is one of the most popular articles I've ever written. People really love to hear about the transformation to the cloud. And one of the largest retailers in the world. And if we don't keep thinking about these shifts and transforming, these are some of the companies that were at the top of their game that missed it in mobile, missed it in cloud, and we'll have another list in 10 years around this AI shift and agents. So I'm going to leave you with this. Do not go at this on your own. There is no such thing as 0 to 1. There's no such thing as 0 to AI. There is a lot of work that came before us, and so I'm here to leave you with a ton of things that you can build on top of. So you have the AI application templates I talked about. We have open source software. There's so many repos to look at and to start from. We have the LLM stores, models as a service now. We have eval tools, tutorials. I told you the eval tool took me 1 minute and 32 seconds to deploy. Start there. And then you have everything you learned this week and everything that you're going to add to this list. So I'm going to leave you with these slides, and within it, you have an architecture diagram, a link to an application that you might use. This is a vision one, so you have a list of different talks that will go in depth. I work with an amazing teacher named Pamela Fox, so she's an advocate that also works on AZD, and she's a Python advocate who does a ton in AI. So I want to call out, she has a couple decks here in my resources. Definitely check them out. And I want you to leave thinking about how it's essential that we recognize our own creativity and that doesn't just come from nothing. It's rooted in everybody who came before us, and it's an honor to be one of those people that somebody else can look back and build on our work. So the whole entire philosophical where ideas come from is something really important. So I'm going to leave you with these 4 books. These are like my top favorite books on the topic, and The Fabric of Civilization is really a gem. It goes all about into the depths of looms and how technology really came to be in computers, and you'll recognize a lot of your own work if you go through that. Again, I'll leave the slides. My name is Kristen, and I thank you so much for the honor of being your last speaker, and I hope you enjoy all the time before you have to take off and depart.